Hey everyone, it is Becky, John, and Will. Excited to come in and talk to you again today. The three of us were just discussing some questions that leads have had for me, that current clients have had, and other things that we've seen being discussed across the boards, really related to performance changes inside of the Google Ads account and sometimes inside of the Merchant Center. We see performance changes happen for a lot of different reasons, and it's really easy for the business owner to look in and assume that they know why those changes are happening, but there's usually a bigger explanation around why we're seeing dips or even rises in performance. So, John, can you kind of kick us off and explain a few of those things that we might see, and then Will, you can piggyback off of that on how you've seen that happen as well.
Yeah, totally. I think one of the frustrating things often for advertisers, business owners, is they want stability in their advertising. They want to know, okay, here's what we're going to get each month, and hopefully it gets better each month. We see that graph going up, but we don't want to see, hey, really great month, and then what happened? The bottom fell out. And that happens sometimes in Google Ads. And often the first, kind of reaction or thought as to what might be causing that is, well, something changed in the campaigns, and that's what's driving things. And sometimes that's true, and sometimes that's not. So there's a lot of different, troubleshooting things that you want to think about when trying to figure out why is performance changing. I'll go through some of those. Will, I'm sure you've got some as well. I think before even I get to some of those, though, also I want to talk about pausing campaigns, because a lot of businesses will want to pause campaigns for a while, or they'll ask, hey, should we pause campaigns for a while, for various reasons. Maybe, hey, they're a small business going on vacation, they don't want to get calls coming in while they're on vacation, or it's the holidays and they think their ad spend's not going to be spent effectively because maybe they're in the lead gen business and they think all their clients are on holiday, things like that. There's a lot of reasons why people might want to pause campaigns for a while. And it's very doable. I mean, you can just go in and pause campaigns in Google. Logistically, it's not a problem at all. But you very much want to keep in mind that Google is constantly learning from the data that you're acquiring in your account. And when you pause a campaign, you are pausing that learning. And when you enable that campaign, you're not necessarily going to go exactly back to where you were previously. If you've been paused for, let's say, a week, 2 weeks, Google is saying, okay, you want to run this again? Well, we don't know what the last couple weeks looked like. We don't know, we don't have recent data. We don't know what your conversion rate is anymore recently. We're going to have to figure it out again. And so you're often going to see potentially worse performance when you re-enable as the system relearns those things, maybe gets more aggressive before they realize it can't get that aggressive, things like that. So it's not that you can't pause campaigns. It's just really think through the potential negative realities of pausing campaigns. And sometimes it's better to, if you really have to decrease volume, at least just decrease the budget and keep something running so that Google is still seeing things run, maybe not spending as much as usual, but still at least having continuity in those campaigns. And that'll decrease your ramp up time when you are ready for the normal level of traffic. So there's some thoughts. Will, what would you add to that, and maybe other common things that we see cause instability in campaign performance?
Yeah, so the one you mentioned is probably the biggest one, where as a small business owner, you're not even thinking about that. All you know is like, hey, I can't handle new leads right now. I don't want to be spending money on capturing those without thinking through the fact that when you pick back up, there's going to be that ramp up period. So it's something that a lot of times you don't think to ask until afterwards. But another thing to keep in mind as well, as we think through, hey, what are some reasons that performance might change that are caused by changes in the account or not in the account? If you're using campaigns that are optimizing for conversion, so as we think through, if you're trying to gather new leads, if that's a cost per acquisition that you're optimizing for, or maximize conversions even, or if you're an e-commerce business, revenue-based bidding strategies, that's dependent on the information that's being captured by those. So if something changes in your process, maybe it's technical, maybe it's not something that you've intentionally done differently, but maybe something was adjusted. A thank you page URL was upended with something that changed it, or maybe something on the e-commerce tracking side is now changed the amount of revenue that's being tracked. That's going to have a very direct impact on Google's ability to optimize the campaigns to hit your goals. John, I think you've had maybe a recent situation where that came up with a client.
Yeah, we had a situation recently where we're running campaigns, we're optimizing to drive phone calls that last for a certain number of minutes as qualified by the client as a lead. And what happened is there was just a manual mistake made on the client's end where they added an automated greeting to the phone number that people called when they got to the website that basically said, hey, we can't help you, and then ended the call. Now, there were two sources of calls to this client. Some of them came from I call them call extensions. Now they're called call assets, but Google's always changing the name. Anyway, the phone number that shows up in the search engine results page, a lot of calls would come from there, people calling even before clicking the ads. And those calls were still coming through like normal. And so the client's still getting a bunch of calls and not realizing that they're not getting calls from the phone number that's on the website. And so we start seeing performance drop, and the client's like, hey, the quality of calls is really going down, which we now know is because now all the calls are coming from the call asset, and usually those calls are a little bit less quality because people haven't gotten to the website yet to read the information. But on the client's end, they don't know that. So they're like, hey, lead quality has changed. What have you changed in the campaigns, the ad copy? Why are we getting this type of traffic? And so we're digging in, trying to figure out all these kinds of things. And at the end of the day, what happened is because those calls weren't coming from the website, or because the calls were being hung up essentially, people who called from the website, they're no longer being counted as conversions by Google. And with Google, we were using target CPA bidding, which is based upon conversions. And so Google's like, wait, people to the website aren't converting. Let's stop sending people to the website. And so, traffic completely changes. Google's pushing the call asset instead of pushing people to get to the website. And so it just completely kind of upended the campaign performance. And it looked like a marketing problem from all the metrics until we actually listened to the call recordings from our own call rating system and realized, hey, you're not getting these calls, and here's what's going on. So that type of thing, especially if you're using target CPA or target ROAS bidding, can just dramatically impact campaign performance, because if you change the data points that Google is making its decisions based upon, then it's going to make different decisions, and you're probably not going to like the results of those decisions. Or at the very least, it's going to take them time to relearn things based upon the new data points. So just always keep that in mind. Whenever you change your website, whenever you change how you're tracking conversions, what you're tracking as conversions, be aware of how that's going to impact your campaigns, and be aware there's probably going to be some ramp up time while Google relearns things related to those changes.
Yeah, and I think that's super important point when it comes to the big question that all businesses ask whenever they're talking to an agency, and it's really why do I need you once the campaigns are set up, right? What are you going to be doing? I mean, they're running, they're good to go. We don't have to worry about it. And basically what I always say is that you need someone that's feeding the monster, because if you don't feed the monster, it's just going to get angrier and angrier, and it's not going to perform the way that you need it to. And we have to make sure that we're collecting that data on their behalf. We're implementing it. We're taking the data from the calls and putting it back into Google in a way that allows it to understand that the ads are working. And so I think that this conversation not only talks about, why you should or shouldn't examine performance more closely, but also why you need someone in the room with the monster, making sure that everything's okay all the time. Because if you want to go on vacation and lower the spend, that's fine. But at least you've got us to make sure that A, performance isn't tanking, something crazy isn't going on. But B, if something good is happening, we want to capitalize off of that for you as well. So I think that that's something that's super important to keep in mind when you are thinking about if you quote unquote need help, once your campaigns are built out.
Yeah, I think that's an important point too, because I think with the way that Google messages these days, it's easy to get the perception that a lot of things are set it and forget it, especially in that bidding strategy world, where it's like, hey, use target CPA bidding. You no longer need to manually change bids, set bid adjustments. The system figures it out and makes the best decisions for you. Awesome, off to the races. But then again, like that example I shared, if anything changes about what's being tracked as a conversion. Even for example, we have clients where, hey, if we're optimizing towards sales, as let's say we're using offline conversion uploads, we're importing sale information into Google, and they've got agents taking phone calls, turning those into sales. if they get a couple of bad agents and their sales rate goes down because they're not doing a good job closing, well, guess what? That starts to look like a marketing problem because their conversion rate's going down, and Google's saying, oh, we can't afford to spend as much per click to get traffic because your conversion rate's lower. And so Google starts getting less aggressive. You see your traffic start dropping, and you have this cycle of, we can't get any traffic from our campaigns. What's happened? Well, it's because your conversion rate of your sales reps changed, and you've got to go back to that root of the issue. So long story short, there's always more to the story, as they say, when it comes to advertising and Google in particular. Will, any other things you'd throw out there for advertisers to keep in mind before we wrap up today's conversation?
Yeah, just don't take anything for granted. Make sure that you understand what's working, what's not working. It's only as good as the information you're feeding it. If you're using a bid strategy that's got an automated element like we've talked about with conversion-based bidding. So look at the source, look at the information you're feeding it. If that's, a thank you page on your website or phone calls like John mentioned here, just make sure you're looking at all the different data points.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is don't make assumptions. It's really easy to assume that you know what's wrong or what's changed. I hear it across the boards. Almost every lead that I talk to, whether they're looking for ongoing management help or coming in with a suspension or some other compliance issue, everybody has an idea in their head already of what the problem is or what caused the problem. And most of the time they've gotten so far into a rabbit hole of assumption that they can't even see the other things that might be a part of it. So I think not jumping to conclusions, taking your time, talking to whoever you're working with about the situation before making any rash decisions like changing campaigns on your own or pausing them yourself. Stop and think that you might not be seeing the whole picture. I think that's really important.
Well, thank you for watching. If you found anything helpful here, please tap that subscribe button. We put out lots of information just like this, trying to help advertisers do better, waste less money, drive more revenue, dominate Google Ads ultimately. So we'd love to continue sharing our thoughts with you. Until next time, John, Becky, Will, signing off.